we agreed to commit this bill to the committee was to allow for public participation, Mr. Speaker. But it is also noteworthy and important to say, Mr. Speaker, that the public participation process and the views given by members of the public to the committee do not necessarily mean that the committee will think or make decisions on behalf of the members, Mr. Speaker. And also, Mr. Speaker, it is factual that all the views that have been given by members of the public have been done so publicly, Mr. Speaker, on public television, Mr. Speaker, and other radio channels. It would also be, Mr. Speaker, not solely honest if members of this House would say, with the importance that we have said, indeed it is true, this bill is very important, that we already do not have our views on it. Mr. Speaker, every member sitting here now is adequately informed. Mr. Speaker, every member sitting here has already followed very keenly what has been happening to all the views given. And Mr. Speaker, most of the members here have already, Mr. Speaker, their views, Mr. Speaker. And irrespective of whatever the committee may come and say in their report, Mr. Speaker, they cannot and they do not have the mandate to think on behalf or to decide on behalf of any of these members, Mr. Speaker. So the debate, Mr. Speaker, that would continue would barely, in all honesty, Mr. Speaker, change the views of the members of this House. And the bill can proceed after this, as does, Mr. Speaker, ordinarily, Mr. Speaker. And we can make amendments at committee stage, Mr. Speaker. Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
Order members, I appreciate my screen is full. But there is also something called being repetitive. And that all of you will be on the same topic. And the topic is allow the House, allow the committee to finalize the report, bring the report so that it's not debated. I mean, members can debate with the benefit of the report. The second matter that has, from the ventilation on the floor, is about giving effect to the constitutional article 99(1)(b). So let me start with that one. That was raised by Senator Kaniri. If you look at the bill before you, Senator Kaniri, on page 22531, Section 8. Section 22 of the Elections Act 2011 is amended in subsection 1 by deleting paragraph B and substituting therefore the following new paragraph B, 8B, holds in the case of a member of parliament a degree from a university recognized in Kenya, or 2, in the case of a member of a county assembly, a degree from a university recognized in Kenya. So in terms of the qualifications in 1B, that is what that section is referring to. So it's very relevant to the title. To the matter before us, this is my determination. Standing Order 129, first reading. Every bill shall be read a first time without motion made or question put. That's what we did on the 23rd of December, and we committed it to the joint committees. I directed that time, because ordinarily the committee has 30 days. I directed that time the committee to have finished its work on the 3rd of January and to submit the report on the 4th for us, because the session should have been yesterday, not today. At the presentation by the committee and in consultation with the political leadership, we agreed to give them one more day on the account that the first and the second were public holidays. And that argument made a lot of merit, and that argument was carried to today. The information, before I go there, second reading. In fact, most of our bills, we need to be honest to ourselves. Most of the bills that have come before us, we have proceeded second reading without the committee submitting the report. The reports become critical, and I've always directed that we cannot be able to move to the third stage, to the third reading, where now you may be considering amendments, where you'll be considering this. So that, because that is now everybody in totality informs the debate. When you do second reading, you are not going to make any amendments, and that's provided for in Standing Order 131. So once the bill was already committed to the House on first reading, each member of this House will assist of the bill. That was your opportunity to interrogate the bill, to look at the bill in preparation for second reading. The committee will, on our behalf, help public participation. They will also get some ideas, and then the totality of your own contributions, as well as the committee contributions, will now help inform whether you want to alter the content of the bill, and that can only be done in third reading. So my directive is that I have sought from the committee, and that they'll be ready, they should have been ready at 10 a.m. Then I want to give them another 1 hour so that they can finalize. So that before we finish this particular session, that report has been tabled before the floor. So that as we break for lunch, you will at least get an opportunity to read the report. So that when you go for third reading, then you can be able to comment. Why do I say so? Part of the reason was, if you look at the way we gazetted today, and compare it with the way we gazetted last time, and you keep tying my hands. Last time I was liberal. But the representations were made to this House to tie my hands. So this time I became more specific in terms of those stages of reading the bill. So that the morning is second reading, the afternoon is third reading. To do otherwise, we are now going to the headways of the kind of issues we are trying to avoid. If it was the previous way I left it a bit open, I would even vary time. Now I cannot even vary time, because we must clear second session at 12:30 p.m. We must start the third session at 2:30 p.m. That one at least has a bit of time up to midnight, which is the end of the day, whichever one comes earlier if we finish. So this is really a straightforward matter, honorable members. We have done it before. I'm sure all of us have opinions. I appreciate that the committee, with the benefit of public participation, will be richer, but all is not lost. Before we conclude the business on the bill, that committee report will be available for our consideration. Two, you don't want to deny yourself the opportunity to make your own representations. So I direct that you proceed on second reading. Thank you. Proceed, Majority Leader. What is Senator Olenjema?
Mr. Speaker, arising from your ruling and looking at the clock, we have very limited time, and considering the interests that members have, will it really be adequate to have a debate and at the second reading between now and 12:30, Mr. Speaker?
Order member, that's anticipating the capacity of the members to summarize issues. Proceed, Majority Leader.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, sir, I beg to move that the Election Laws Amendment Bill number 3 of 2015 be read a second time. Mr. Speaker, sir, I want to take the shortest time possible in moving this bill. And I want to start by saying this bill is largely about elections, and elections are about democracy. Our country has done well, despite the challenges we have had since independence. We have tried, as a nation, to aspire to be a democratic state. And one of the tenets of that aspiration is the holding of periodic general elections and by-elections when vacancies arise. So, Mr. Speaker, we already have a comprehensive electoral law which was passed in 2011, and this amendment bill is aimed at strengthening what we already have ahead of the next election, which is just over 7 months away from now. Mr. Speaker, therefore, the importance of this bill cannot be overemphasized. The earlier we dispense with the proposed legislative issues, the better for the country, so that we can give clarity, stability, and certainty to our electoral process. Mr. Speaker, allow me to highlight a few clauses that are critical or that I consider critical in this bill. First and foremost, Mr. Speaker, it is proposed that all political parties must hear and determine intra-party disputes concerning party primaries, and this must happen at least 60 days before the election. Mr. Speaker, as you are aware, one of the most difficult challenges we have in our electoral practice is the issue of intra-party democracy. As much as I have said, our elections have largely been competitive, largely democratic, we have a big challenge as a country with regard to intra-party competition or democracy. So this bill is clarifying that all disputes within parties must be heard, determined, and finalized in good time so as to allow the other preparations concerning elections, especially the issue of printing of ballots, Mr. Speaker, which must be certain. You must be certain who are the candidates. And for that to happen, issues arising from political party primaries must be resolved in good time so that all the candidates, their images, their parties, their symbols can be available for the Electoral Commission to be able to print and deliver in good time ballot papers. Secondly, Mr. Speaker, sir, the bill provides for a review of academic qualifications for people seeking elective leadership in our country. At the moment, Mr. Speaker, sir, there are minimum qualifications for all seats. There has been debate in our nation, Mr. Speaker, on whether we should review the requirements, the academic requirements for people running for the office of Member of Parliament, including the National Assembly and the Senate, as well as the county assemblies. Much of the debate, Mr. Speaker, has concentrated on those positions because already with regard to the office of President, Deputy President, Governor, and Deputy Governor, the qualifications which are there, namely at least a university degree, many people have felt that that is an adequate minimum requirement. This bill proposes to provide similar qualifications, Mr. Speaker, sir, for the position of Member of Parliament, the two houses of Parliament, as well as county assemblies, so that they could also be adequately, intellectually prepared to be able to discharge their legislative and oversight functions. It has been argued, Mr. Speaker, and I think it's an argument worth considering, that perhaps the representational role of members of parliament may not require much academic education. But the roles of oversight, which includes scrutinizing budgets and being able really to hold state agencies at the two levels of government accountable for public funds, and being able to question government functionaries and engage them for purposes of oversight, as well as the legislative function of parliament and county assemblies, requires some academic qualifications. However, Mr. Speaker, it is proposed in this bill so that you do not disenfranchise a large number of leaders in our country who have done so well, despite the fact that they do not have a university degree. In fact, some of the best debaters, some of the most brilliant and most productive members of parliament in the past in our country have been people who necessarily did not have a degree. And there are good reasons why somebody may not have a degree. One reason could be maybe they didn't get an opportunity to get an education because of financial reasons or other reasons. In the past, we even have leaders who were thrown out of college simply because of bad politics, and therefore they could not be able to complete their studies. So there could be reasons why you could have good leaders who may not have the qualifications. And I want to be clear on this one. This is my personal belief, Mr. Speaker. What education does is just to improve the leadership in you. Leadership is all the other things that we do, other than the things we know about the science and the other things that we learn in college. However, Mr. Speaker, times are changing. The dynamics of parliamentary democracy are changing all over the world, and we need to ask ourselves whether this is not the time to start looking at these things. To provide an opportunity, therefore, Mr. Speaker, for leaders who may not have the proposed qualifications to adjust, Mr. Speaker, and be able to acquire the necessary qualifications so that they are not locked out of future elections. It is proposed in this bill to suspend the operations of these requirements to the general election following the elections of 2017. In this case, Mr. Speaker, to suspend this requirement to August 2022. Thirdly, Mr. Speaker, it is required, and Mr. Speaker, it is required, thirdly, there's a small amendment to allow to allow referendum committees in the event of a referendum. And I'm happy to note that our country is also entrenching our democratic practices around referenda, because the way you listen to citizens is not just through periodic elections. In between, there could be issues that cannot wait for a general election. In between, there are issues which you want to isolate, issues of general public policy, foreign policy, internal policy, issues of governance, which you want the people to directly tell you as leaders what they want about those issues. So, Mr. Speaker, we have a good practice of referenda, and one of the things that has arisen, because we have had several referenda now, Mr. Speaker, one of the reasons that has risen continuously is that our referendum law is not actually there. Yeah? So we have bits and pieces, mentions in the Constitution, mentioned like what I'm about to say now in this amendment bill, and the need for a comprehensive referendum law, therefore, is something that is urgent so that we can also entrench our democratic practice around referendum. Referenda is a very good way of gauging the public mood. It's a very good way of governments assessing the feelings of the public outside the confines of a general election, which can be emotive and clouded. It is proposed, Mr. Speaker, that referendum committees may appoint agents at every polling station, at least one agent per polling station across the country, so that, again, to avoid a situation where the issue of agents during a referendum becomes like a matter which is not entrenched. Further, Mr. Speaker, in the event of a vacancy in the office of governor, any person who wants to vie for such an office, in the case of a death or resignation of a governor or removal by other constitutional means, any independent candidates may submit their parties, symbols, etc. 7 days before nominations. In the current election law, there was no mention of independent candidates, and therefore this amendment is trying to take care of that. Mr. Speaker, number 5, a public officer who intends to participate in a by-election shall resign from public office within 7 days after declaration of a vacancy. Mr. Speaker, we have had a problem in this country before on the question of public officers and participation in elections. The law as it is now clearly provides that in the case of a general election, holders of public office are required to resign 6 months before the general election. But there is no similar provision for by-elections. So the net effect is that a by-election is declared somewhere, somebody is holding public office. Actually, technically, that person can campaign while in office until they are elected without resigning, because these are things that perhaps were not anticipated or were overlooked during the drafting of the Elections Act of 2011. Number 6, Mr. Speaker, this bill proposes that the IEBC shall provide for the inspection of the register 90 days to the general election. This is very important in this country where there have been disputes and disagreements on the content, nature, and accuracy of the register, the voters' register. It is important that the IEBC is commanded, as it is through this bill, to provide for the inspection of the register 90 days before the general election. And the inspection period is proposed to be at least 30 days, a minimum of 30 days, or any further period that the Commission may consider necessary. Mr. Speaker, 2 other last things, namely, 1, the issue of campaign financing, which is also another addition to our democratic journey. We have enacted the campaign financing law, and now we're in the process of trying to make it operational. There has been some contentious issues of late concerning this matter, and therefore certain aspects of that law is proposed that they be suspended until after the next general election. But one particular issue which was in the public domain a few weeks ago, it is the matter of candidates or aspirants who want to run for office in the 2017 election being required by IEBC through regulations to open accounts, campaign finance accounts, to appoint campaign finance committees, and that was to be done by 7th of December last year. Mr. Speaker, this matter, I think some of the aspirants were able to comply, others have not been able to comply. There are others even who have gone to court for interpretation on this matter. Mr. Speaker, the regulations that gave rise to that requirement are not in operation. Draft regulations were submitted to the National Assembly, but the National Assembly has rejected those regulations, and I think the process of making fresh regulations is in force, is in course. Therefore, Mr. Speaker, except for what I have said, the issue of appointing campaign finance committees and opening campaign finance accounts that issue, it is proposed, should be suspended, or rather should be, the time for doing that should be reduced from 8 months to 2 months, Mr. Speaker. That is the proposal here. Finally, Mr. Speaker, this bill proposes to amend Article or Clause Section 44 of the Elections Act of 2011. And I know, Mr. Speaker, this has been the most talked about proposal, and I'm sure wherever the committee of the Senate is, I am convinced beyond peradventure that they are doing a good job and they have listened to Kenyans. And I want to commend you once more, Mr. Speaker, and the entire House for taking the route we took collectively. It was in the interest of our country. The effect of cooling down tempers was dramatic. The faith in this House,
What is it, Senator Wetangula?
has increased.
Mr. Speaker, do you notice that the opposite side has literally turned the sitting into a baraza? There's so many caucuses and consultations, we can't even hear what the majority leader is saying about the bill.
Order, members. Order, Senator Chariot. How can you not recognize and appreciate your leader when he's moving the motion? Proceed, Professor Kindiki.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I am tempted to thank the leader of minority.
Order, Professor. You should not be tempted. He even bailed you from your own side.
I hear you, Mr. Speaker. The choice of word was deliberate. But, Mr. Speaker, Mr. Speaker, the issue of amending or the proposed amendment to Section 44 has raised a lot of public interest, which I commend personally because I think that is healthy in a democracy. Secondly, Mr. Speaker, I was saying that the route this House took is a route that has been applauded, encouraged, and praised by very many quarters, including quarters that have been skeptical in the past about the capacity of this House. So, Mr. Speaker, I want to thank you, and I want to thank all the senators, irrespective of our party affiliations. The route we took, the decision we took, has helped the country to at least talk to itself and look for a solution. And I'm grateful, or rather I'm hopeful, Mr. Speaker, that today, one way or the other, through our committees, we are able to resolve this matter amicably and for the interest of our nation. Mr. Speaker, I just want to end by saying that the proposal, Mr. Speaker, is to create
what is Senator Dr. Bon Kalwale is about to conclude.
Mr. Speaker, it is precisely because he's about to conclude that I decided to request you that I interrupt him. The leader of the majority, having persuaded you to allow second reading to go on before the committee report is tabled, has taken a lot of time, Mr. Speaker, speaking to the other amendments. But the country today is in tension, not about the education levels of MCAs and people. It is because of an attempt to amend Section 44.
Order, Senator.
Mr. Speaker, sir.
Order. That's a point of argument.
No, Mr. Speaker, I want to point to the discretion.
In fact, if you are opposed to that particular provision, and the majority leader has failed to convince you, the better for you. Why would you want to aid him?
Yes, Mr. Speaker, you've guided me, but the point I wanted to make was not that I invite him to convince me, but I wanted to imagine what will happen in the afternoon. In the afternoon, we shall have the third reading, Mr. Speaker, and the paper will have been tabled.
Order, Senator Dr. Bon Kalwale. You know, I am always reluctant to order you out of order for obvious reasons, because you are good at what you are doing. But on this one, you are anticipating a debate. This is just the first contribution to the debate. There will be more contributors. Why do you think that the other people will not contribute on the same issue, including yourself? Wait for your moment.
I wanted to request you, Mr. Speaker, sir, that in view of the failure by the leader of government side to speak to the amendment that has brought tension in the country, because third reading, Mr. Speaker, it is not a time for debate. You allow us, when it will come to third reading, to debate this point, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker,
Order, Senator Dr. Bon Kalwale, you are completely out of order. And you are an authority on our procedures. There is a difference between contributions to the motion, and there is a and it's very different from a point of order. So the point of order should be if the majority leader said something that is not accurate or not appropriate. But what you are raising is a major contribution. It's about, can't see there properly. It's about 12 past 11. Our session ends at 12:30. I would like to encourage Senator Dr. Bon Kalwale. You still have more contributors to contribute. If one member fails, who tells you maybe the second or any other person will not speak to the same point? Hold your horses. Proceed, complete the majority leader. We need to make progress.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, sir, the amendment on Section 44 of the Elections Act is aimed at providing clarity and certainty to the provision on electronic voter register. This provision proposes that the IEBC shall put in place a complementary mechanism for purposes of ensuring that in the event of the failure of the electronic gadgets, that backup, that alternative or complementary mechanism can be utilized. Mr. Speaker, sir, nowhere does this proposal mention the word manual, which I've heard a lot being used. The word used is complementary mechanism. The complementary mechanism can be just complementary. Mr. Speaker, sir, and still under Section 109 of the Elections Act, the IEBC is entitled to make regulations, and I'm sure should there be any ambiguities left out, that provision also is able to help. And this is very common legislation, Mr. Speaker. So, Mr. Speaker, I want to request senators to keep up, all of us, with the good work we started the last time we were here, and give this country a way forward in a respectful manner. And as we emphasized last time, whatever decision is made, let it be for the advancement of democracy in our country. And this is not about this way or that way. It's about democracy, and it's about persuasion, and it's about making decisions. The majority will have their way, the minority will have their say. Mr. Speaker, without much ado, I beg to move. I request